process. We know there was heightened security measures as well, and we're just glad that I'm sure that a lot of Americans and residents there breathed a collective sigh of relief that nothing extraordinary went down. Now, we do have eyes and ears on the ground, so we go right now straight to the nation's capital to know the latest following yesterday's inauguration. We're now connected with Mr. Nova Poerwadi from Voice of America, live from Washington, D.C. Good morning, Nova.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Marissa.
So take us through the process of the inauguration, before and after, and how everything went.
It went pretty smoothly and quickly, around only 1 hour, 11:30 to around 12:30. It was mostly focused on the core events of the swearing in, and also several other things like the invocation and also prayer, and also the national anthem by Lady Gaga. There was also a musical number by Jennifer Lopez, and also another musical number by Garth Brooks. Now, it is emphasizing unity, as you mentioned in your report. Unity, unity, unity. Now, I was wearing a bow tie yesterday, ready for an inaugural ball, which isn't happening because of the coronavirus. Today, you can see me wearing bipartisan purple. I've lived in this city maybe too long. I moved here in 2005 during the second term of George W. Bush. I've now seen 3 changes of government, including the most recent one only a few hours ago. And you'll see in events like State of the Union, for instance, purple being worn because it's bipartisan. It's the combination of blue, the symbol for Democrats, and red, the symbol for Republicans. That was also kind of the theme that President Joe Biden mentioned in his inaugural address. He basically mentioned that political differences don't need to be the cause of total war between people. It's time to listen to each other again. It's time to see each other again. It's time to respect each other again. Respect each other's differences. It's also time to not play liberally with the truth, not manufacture the truth, no alternative facts anymore, even though he didn't use that term, but basically maybe a return to normalcy and a return to, as you say in your previous report, a more civil discourse, whether or not you agree with someone. Now, of course, the uncivil war reference is in reference to the Civil War that the U.S. had in the 19th century. He also hearkened back in his speech to Abraham Lincoln, who had to reunite the country after several states seceded in the Civil War. He's calling for the end of the uncivil war, a term to designate the polarization and the somewhat irreconcilable differences that people seem to have these days over policy, over facts, and over other things. He's calling for an end to that. So that was the general theme, and also the theme of even things like the musical choices. Jennifer Lopez sang, "This land is your land, this land is my land," something that harkens back to the diversity of the U.S. from California to New York, from the north to the south. All over the U.S., it is a very diverse nation. We also saw that, as you mentioned, the first South Asian, the first Asian, the first Indian American, the first black woman to be elected and sworn in as vice president. And the interesting thing is, she was sworn in by Justice of the Supreme Court, Sonia Sotomayor, who is the first Hispanic and also Latina who has served in the highest court of the land. So there's a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of messages of unity, and you also saw that there were the former presidents, Bill Clinton, former First Lady Hillary Clinton, George W. Bush, former First Lady Laura Bush, and also Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. The only people who gave the inauguration a miss were Donald Trump, for his own reasons, the outgoing president, even though Vice President Mike Pence attended the ceremony, and he also had some pleasantries and a send-off with his successor, Kamala Harris, and also the president of the U.S. in the 1970s, Jimmy Carter and Rosalind Carter. They are still alive, but still very much alive and healthy, although they are in their 90s. So they've decided not to attend, even though they send their best to the new president and vice president. And Joe Biden also mentioned in his inaugural address the message that he got from Jimmy Carter. So that was the interesting thing about today's ceremony. It was short and sweet, but also emphasizing unity, something that has been lacking in Washington, D.C., and also across the nation with polarization, social media, and a lot of the maybe similar developments in Indonesia of people just not getting along, Paul and Marissa.
Yeah, and I would like to really underline the messages that you just said there, Nova, about listening to each other again, about seeing each other again, respecting each other and respecting the differences, because that's what happens when social media helps to polarize a society. It has also happened in Indonesia in some of the elections where, you know, like the ones who are pro-President Jokowi and those who are pro-Prabowo at that time, now our defense minister, they don't talk to each other anymore. They're so angry with one another.
Right.
With President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris now as the leaders in America, we can also probably predict that there's going to be a change in the face of COVID handling in America. Now, after the swearing in, Nova, can you sense the vibe or the energy of the American people, especially after listening to the message that President Biden said?
What's interesting is there, especially in the U.S. Capitol, there was an uneasy calm, especially after the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. There was an uneasy calm, even though people were reassured by the presence of so many thousands and tens of thousands of security forces in the U.S. Capitol. But also, I think a lot of people are really, really tired, both in Washington, D.C. and across America. They want to sleep well, they want to wake up well, and they want to, not be rocked by this scandal or this controversy or that controversy. So the new administration also brings with it perhaps a hope of a more stable government. And also Joe Biden ran on a platform of a more national, centralized, organized COVID relief and COVID handling. He's also gone strong on a federal mask mandate. He's also gone strong on vaccinations with the goal of vaccinating at least 100 million Americans by 100 days of his administration. The U.S. has around 300 million population, and so that's one of his goals. A lot of people are of course relieved that there's now at least a federal response, because they've been used to a more localized state-by-state response. So if you live in New York, where they're taking it very seriously, you're probably more assured by the local government, by Governor Andrew Cuomo, and also in California, where they're also taking it seriously. You're perhaps very reassured by Governor Gavin Newsom and what they're doing there. And sometimes they're taking such strict measures, including not even outside dining. Even though California, as we know, is different from most places in the U.S. Yep. Currently it's winter, but in California it's pretty much warm all year long. So outdoor dining should be fine. But because of the severity of the COVID pandemic there, even outdoor dining has been banned, especially in places like Los Angeles. So, it's been a localized sort of response to the coronavirus pandemic. If you live in states which are more lax, like Florida, you might be a little concerned because even the governor there, Governor DeSantis, went against mask mandates that were enforced by municipalities, by cities. So this haphazard response to the coronavirus pandemic was a bit of a concern. And right now you have a president who's concerned about or willing to give a federal response. I don't want to get crude, but the previous response, by relying on local state governments, people have likened it to a pool. So if you allow kids to just do whatever they want on one end of the pool, the mess is going to get to the whole pool, if you know what I mean.
The ripple effect, most definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's why we're wearing masks here, Nova.
Yes.
Because we want to send a clear message.
Home, so otherwise, I would be wearing a mask.
I know. You're alone. You're in your house. It's okay.
We need to see your face. All right. Obviously, the most noticeable absentee throughout the inauguration was now former President Donald Trump. So we saw also that he had left the White House at approximately 8:30 a.m., so several hours before the inauguration took place. Can you give us a little bit of an update as to how the supporters have reacted, Trump supporters rather, have reacted to the inauguration, as well as Trump himself, obviously not making himself available at the inauguration?
Now, of course, a lot of former president. This is the thing about political reporters like myself. Whenever a change of government happens, it's still it's still a slip of the tongue. We still call the previous president president, and the incoming president president-elect. Yes. No, former President Trump. His supporters, a lot of his supporters, some of them, a significant number of them, believe his accusations of a stolen election, even though that's not proven in the courts, and also by the counting of individual states. A lot of them still believe him, but apparently there's been a sea change after the attacks on January 6th, and so we'll have to see how the developments go forward. But what we have seen is a break between President Trump and a lot of other Republicans. Now, President Trump wanted to be sent off with perhaps a hero's send-off with a lot of his supporters, a lot of Republicans. None of the major Republicans came, not even Vice President Mike Pence. Vice President Mike Pence basically said, I'm attending the inauguration. It's logistically impossible for me to attend your send-off. A lot of his former aides were also invited, but never showed up. And this also reflects perhaps the split within the Republican Party now, after the insurrection, so-called, after the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Now, there's still some unfinished business. The Senate still has to hold an impeachment trial against President Trump, which is oddly happening after he's left office. As I mentioned the other day, impeachment proceedings in the U.S. aren't like in other countries, whereas usually in other countries, Brazil, for instance, if the parliament impeaches the president, then the president is immediately let go, immediately taken out of office. But in the U.S., basically the House of Representatives impeaches the president, and we've only had 3 presidents in our history that have been impeached. But that serves only as sort of like the prosecution. You still have to have a trial in the Senate. And this time in the Senate, a lot of Republicans are actually, well, I mean, we don't have to even go to the Senate first. In the House of Representatives, 10 Republicans voted to support impeachment. And in the Senate now, a lot of Republicans have indicated that they are for impeachment or removal as well, and possible barring of Donald Trump from ever running again as president. And he's planned to run again in 2024, as he's also indicated during his goodbye farewell speech. The interesting thing here, the person to watch is Mitch McConnell, the former leader of the Senate, the former Senate Majority Leader, who is now the Senate Minority Leader, thanks to the 2 runoff elections in Georgia, which were won by Democrats. So he's also indicated, he hasn't said that he would vote for removal, but he has been rather vague, but also signaling that he could support removal, Paul and Marissa. So these are interesting developments, also showing the split within the Republican Party, whether they want to still be the party of Trump or whether they want to go back to their roots, to people call them principled Republicans, people like Mitt Romney, who voted for removal during the first impeachment trial, and also other Republicans who are motivated more by principle, ideology, instead of just supporting the former last Republican President Trump, Marissa and Paul.
All right. Well, also, let's talk about the cabinet of President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, because as we know so far, his cabinet actually is not confirmed yet. Yes, we know there are names like Janet Yellen, Avril Haines, Alejandro Mayorkas, Anthony Blinken, retired Army General Lloyd Austin, and also the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. And there's also this interesting fact about an all-female White House senior communications team. So could you give us an insight on the cabinet of the current administration?
Well, Joe Biden has always emphasized diversity, both in terms of a lot of women and also a lot of people of color. You'll see Asian Americans, you'll see Black Americans, you'll see a lot of diverse Americans in the cabinet. But they're also based on scale as well. Anthony Blinken, the incoming or the nominee for Secretary of State, was former Deputy Secretary of State. So he's very experienced. So it's not only a matter of choosing a Black person, a woman, an Indian American, an Asian American, but also based on their skills, their capabilities. And that has reassured a lot of people, including Wall Street is very reassured by Janet Yellen, who was instrumental in offsetting or getting the U.S. out of the last recession, her being the Treasury Secretary, which is basically the Finance Secretary of the U.S. They're very happy with her. Anthony Blinken as well. They're very happy with him as well. And a lot of these cabinet choices inspired confidence in the stock market, especially when they deal with the economy, and also among diplomatic circles, perhaps. Of course, foreign policy-wise, the message of the Biden administration has always been from day one, or at least day one of them announcing their foreign policy team, of America is back. Now, what does that mean? It means America is back to re-engaging allies and also partners. We know that the previous administration tended to take an America First approach. In fact, that was part of then President Donald Trump's inaugural address, was America First, where he also mentioned American carnage, which was a rather bleak take on where America was at the time. Quite different from the hopeful message that most presidents give in their inaugural speech, including Joe Biden just a few hours ago. Now, America First, when it applies to foreign policy, analysts and also critics have said it also means America alone. And a lot of these policies have made America alone. For instance, withdrawing from the WHO and several other international organizations, withdrawing from several international agreements, including the Iran nuclear deal, and also the Paris Climate Accords.
Yep.
These are things that the Biden administration is very keen on reversing and has, in fact, started reversing. We also see, in terms of the legislative agenda, at least two big bills coming up or being submitted to Congress right away. One is the $1.6 trillion stimulus package to offset COVID, both in terms of vaccinations and also in terms of the economic impact. Part of it is up to $1,400 in direct checks to each taxpayer, something that was demanded from the last stimulus package, but that stimulus package only agreed to up to $600 in direct payments to taxpayers, and also the other one, which is sort of surprising, is a law to reform America's immigration system, including dealing with the 11 million or so undocumented immigrants. Immigration is a very important issue in the U.S. Now, domestically, we always hear about undocumented immigrants and also DACA. These are undocumented immigrants who were brought into the U.S. as children, and so their deportation was deferred during the Obama administration, and there's always been a back and forth during the Trump administration. Yeah. But there's also several details that perhaps affect Indonesians more, affect Asian Americans more, affect Indians more, and those are the legal immigration channels, whether through family or through work sponsorship. That's also been the subject of back and forth. Some Republicans in the Senate want to end family-based or severely restrict family-based immigration. So, for instance, they want to stop citizens and green card holders from sponsoring parents or grown adult children. And so they want to cut in half legal immigration. And so, these are a lot of the things that are still left hanging. And now that the Congress, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, are both in Democratic hands, it might be easier for Joe Biden to enact a lot of his legislative agenda, even though his also, on top of that, his bipartisan approach may also win over some Republicans who are willing to negotiate, to listen, to see each other again, to disagree and find a common ground again. Perhaps that is hopefully going to be the norm in Washington, D.C. after so many years of deadlock, so many years of debate, so many years of stonewalling, that so little got done in Washington,
brighter
D.C.
days coming ahead in the United States of America.
I look forward to going there again when COVID is over.
Looking forward to travel. Nova, thank you so much for giving us an update over there, and we hope that everything continues to run smoothly. We do know that right now Biden's team is holding its first press briefing.
Yes.
So we're quite sure you want to get on top of that and see what's happening. I'm sure there's a lot of issues being discussed there as well. So again, thank you so much. Mas Nova Poerwadi from Voice of America there, our eyes and ears and boots on the ground in Washington, D.C., giving us the latest after the presidential inauguration.
You have a good day. Yeah, and we're gonna have another talk show. I mean, it's always great to hear Nova give us like the full report of what's going on, especially.
Yes. I love his purple tie.
I know, right? It's bipartisan. Isn't that a great message?
Yeah, awesome.
Anyway, we'll have another talk show, but this time we'll talk about pregnancy in the pandemic.